I've got a joke for you today. It's kind of like a visual riddle, but the first person to get this one right gets 2 free textures or blend files from my library. Who am I? By the way, if you know me in person and I've told you this joke before, please don't spoil it for anyone else. I want to give people the chance to torture themselves first before they get the answer. Anyways, today I'm going to show you how to create this procedural vase generator using geometry nodes. I'm still pretty new to these nodes, and my understanding of them is pretty basic, so if you're a beginner, I think you should be able to follow along. Here's what the node setup is going to look like. It's only going to take about 5 minutes to set up the geometry nodes. Then for the rest of the video, I'm going to show you how I textured these, set up the camera in the background, and then set up the group input so you can access the settings in the modifier stack. Hey look, Sam has a Patreon. Wink. For the setup here, I'm going to switch the whole middle area to the geometry node editor, and the top right to the 3D viewport. Over top of the node editor, I'm going to hit N to go to that shelf, and just hit New at the top to create a new node tree. Make this window a little larger just so we can see it a bit better, and hold down Z, move your mouse up, and you'll be in rendered mode. I'm going to switch over to the Cycles render engine. There's no reason you can't do this in Eevee, but I just prefer Cycles. And I'm also going to switch to GPU compute. It's a little faster for my system, but it's not necessary. I'm also going to switch over to this World Properties tab to set up an HDRI lighting system. And where it says color, there's this yellow circle next to it. Go ahead and click that and click Environment Texture and Open. And then navigate to where you got some HDRIs. I've got some free ones I picked up from HDRI Haven. And I'm just going to choose Autumn Park 1K. So it's in the background there. It's lighting my scene. I'm going to turn that off so that it's not visible, but it continues to light my scene by going to Ray Visibility and unclicking Camera. So I'm going to hit Shift A over top of the node editor to bring in a node. And I'm just going to search for quadratic Bezier. Bring that in. Just place it right here. It'll replace this group input as the first node so that our cube disappears. And now we have this curve here. We've got these controls here. We can move them around, and it changes the properties of our curve. It's actually pretty cool, and I recommend you try playing around with this if you're not familiar with this. It's very useful, and what we're going to do is we're going to change the start to everything 0 except for the... actually, everything's going to be 0. So then the middle is going to be everything 0 except for Z is going to be 0.5. And then for the end, we're going to do everything 0 except for the Z at 1. So if we look at this, it's just a straight line going up vertically. You know, there's the start point, 0, 0, 0. Here's the midpoint right here, 0.5 for the Z. And then the end point is 1 for the Z. And again, if we wanted to change this around, we could, but this is how I'm going to set it up initially. The next node I'm going to bring in is curve to mesh. I'll place it right here. And by itself, it doesn't do anything. I'm going to bring in one more node, curve circle. Place it right here and run this output into the profile curve input on that curve to mesh. Then we can control this resolution. If we bring it down far enough, it turns into this triangle. I'm going to set this at 16, and this radius is something we can also control. I'm going to set this at 0.5. Right now this is just a tube, so I'm also going to click on fill caps on this curve to mesh, so it's actually a cylinder with the top and bottom face. I'm going to move these over a little bit and bring in another node that's set curve radius and place it here. This allows me to control the radius again, but it's a different input. You know, it's the diamond versus the circle input, and I can plug something in here that I can't plug into here, and that is a noise texture. So I'll search for noise, place it right here, and if I run the factor into this radius here, we can see that this noise now drives that radius. I'm going to move these nodes over here and just bring in a math node. I'll leave it on add there. I'm going to duplicate it and place it right before the first one. Open this up and hit M, and it's going to change to multiply. These allow me to control kind of the overall range if I adjust this multiply, and the add is kind of where the range starts and stops. So it's just a general offset. I'm going to change the noise to 4D as well. Then this W value allows me to cycle through these different iterations of that noise. Next, I'm going to grab these 4 nodes here, basically all the green ones, and hit Shift D, move them all down here, and I'm going to plug this add into the radius down here as well. So our vase is coming along, but right now we still got that top and bottom face. So I figured an easy way to do this was to kind of do a Boolean operation in the geometry nodes. So I'm going to search for mesh Boolean, bring it in here, and I'm going to plug the top into mesh 1, and this bottom curve to mesh is going to go into mesh 2. Because these are the same shape too, when we plug this into geometry, it just disappears for now. To fix that, we can reduce this radius right here just very slightly, and then we've got a tube again, but that's not quite what we want because we also want to adjust something here. I'm going to change this Z to 0.1, this one to 0.6, and this one is going to be 1.1. And now we've got a bottom face, but no top face. So I'm going to bring in a few value nodes here. Just type in value, and I'm going to set this to 0.5, and I'm going to run this into the radius up here and the radius down here. I'll just make a little incision there and run this into the radius. And I'm going to bring in a math node, place it right here, and this is going to be a subtract, and we're just going to subtract 0.1. I'm going to duplicate this value node here and just set this to 16, and then I'm going to plug it into the resolution here and up here on those two quadratic Béziers. And let's duplicate that one more time and do the same thing for the resolution on these curved circles here. And that way we can control these right here if we want. We can control the resolution, move it up and down, and it'll change for everything at once. Going back to this noise texture, if we wanted, we could decrease the scale to something like 2. It's going to be a lot more gradual with these indents, and we can still control the W. The change is going to be less drastic there. So, if we want to increase this, just be prepared for, a lot more crazy changes to happen when we move that W value back and forth. So next, let's talk about texturing this here. In order to get a material to show up on this mesh here, we're going to have to bring in the set material node and just place it right here. And right now, I've only got that default material that I start out with. So I'm going to put that on there. And let's split our screen and open up the shader editor on the right here. If you can't see your principled BSDF there, you just hit the /delete key while this is highlighted, and it should center on everything. I'm going to hit Shift-A and start typing in coordinate to bring in a texture coordinate node. And let's run out of the generated output there. And I got that preview really fast by going Control-Shift, left-click on this node here. I'm going to bring in a separate XYZ node, place it here, and let's just run the the Z output there into a color ramp. I'm going to move this over a little bit, and if we adjust these flags, you can see the black and the white values go up and down vertically there. I'll get a bit more room here. And let's come out of the object into a noise texture. Just place it right here. And it doesn't really matter which output we use, but I guess I used the factor originally, so I'm just going to use that again. I'm going to run it into another color ramp right here. And let's change the scale to 100. So it's quite small. Then I'm going to set the flags here. The black is going to come up to 0.15, and the white is going to come down to about 0.43. I'm going to bring in a mix RGB and just place it right here. And this Z is going to go into color 1. This output from the color ramp is going to go into color 2. If you look at this here, we can see they're basically mixing together. If we move this back and forth, we get more of that noise. If we move this to the left, we get more of this separate XYZ node there. So I'm going to put this at 0.3. So it's mostly the separate XYZ. And if you look at this here, we can adjust this, and it's kind of, oh, on the wrong one. It's kind of a black noise and then white at the top texture. We only have so much range with this color ramp here, so I'm going to move all this over and just put a math node in here to help us control this a little bit better. Put it right here. I'm going to change it to subtract by hitting S, and I'll just set this at 0.6 for now. For this color ramp here, I'm going to set the first one. I'm going to bring it down to 0, open this up, and change the hex code to CDA 151, which is kind of a yellowish color. The second flag, I'm going to leave it on white, and I'm going to put it at 0.5. I'm going to create a third flag in the middle there, open it up, and this hex code is going to be 7F551E. It's kind of a brown color there. I'm going to plug this into the base color on the principled BSDF. If you look at this, it's starting to look a little bit better already. I'm also going to decrease the roughness to 0.1. It's just a little shinier there. I'm going to go back to this noise texture and color ramp, and I'm going to duplicate both of these with Control-Shift-D so they remain attached to this object output from the texture coordinate. I'm going to change this scale to 200. Let's look at that here. It's a little smaller. I'm also going to change the color ramp values here. The white is going to go down to 0.7, I guess up to 0.7, and the black, which is right beside it right now, I'm going to put this at 0.75. So we've basically got these tiny black dots all over the place. I'm going to run this into a bump node, place it here. This is going to go into the height, and I'm going to run this into the normal here. That basically creates some subtle bump all over our mesh. So I'm going to rename this Vase Material 1. And if we click this here, we can create a new material, and let's start working on that now. I'm going to call this Vase Material 2, and I'm going to delete everything except for that bump at the bottom there. And I'm going to start bringing in a noise texture, place it right here, and just run object into that noise texture. Let's look at that. I guess we can't see it because we have the other material here, so let's change this material to Vase Material 2. Now we can see it. I'm going to set this scale at 2, and I'm going to bring the distortion up a little bit to 3, so it's a little swirly. Then I'm going to bring in a second noise texture and place it here. And I guess I was running the color originally, so I might as well be consistent. And this is actually coming out of the factor. It's not like it really matters, but it's just how I had it for my original texture there. We can see all these nice swirls. I actually increased the distortion a little bit, but I'm going to leave it a little lower because I like the look of this here. I'm going to run this into a color ramp, place it here, and I just had the two flags. The top one I had set to white, and I'm going to bring that to 0.58. And this bottom flag, I'm going to put it at 0.48 or 49, somewhere around there. And I'm going to change the color of that to kind of a bluish color, which was 7BC4E7. Now I'm going to run this into the base color on the principled BSDF, and let's look at that. So originally I did have this distortion set at 4 on the second noise texture, but after looking at it a second time, I kind of like the more subtle look of this distortion set to 0, but it's up to you. Let's also set this strength at 0.5 as well, actually. I think it looks a little bit more realistic. I'm going to do that for the first one as well, just on this bump. Set the strength to 0.5. Let's create a new material here, and let's call it Vase Material 3. Let's start working on that. I'm going to delete all of these except for the texture coordinate and principled BSDF, and make sure you created a new material before you delete those, otherwise it'll delete everything. I'm going to set Vase Material 3 to my mesh there so we can see what we're working on. I'm going to come out of the object output here, and I'm going to go into a wave texture. Okay, not the right one. Wave texture. Place it here, and I'm going to set the second selection to Z instead of X, and change this scale to 14. I'm going to search for a displacement node and just bring it in here. Make sure this is going into the height. Then go ahead and connect this to the displacement on the material output. Nothing's going to be happening yet because we also need to go down to the material properties and make sure Vase Material 3 is selected there. And scroll down to where it says settings. We're going to change it from bump only to displacement only. Then come up to the modifier panel and go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier. On this displacement node, I'm going to change the scale to something way lower, 0.01. Let's look at this principled BSDF here. We can't quite see anything yet. I'm also going to change this subdivision surface modifier, turn it up to 3 on both the render and levels viewport. If you look at the top, it looks a little weird. I'm going to go back to geometry nodes just by clicking on it on the modifier. Otherwise, you won't see it in the geometry nodes window here. Open this up, and I found it fixed it if I just put a subdivide mesh node right here on the top line. Lastly, I'm going to change the base color on this principled BSDF. The hex code is going to be C3E76E, just kind of a greenish color there. So I'm just going to set up my 3 geometry node setups here just by duplicating this guy here and moving one over there, moving another one just to the right, Shift D, and I'm just holding down Control so it snaps to grid as well. So this first one here, let's change this to a new geometry node setup just by clicking right here. And actually, I guess we should have done it, well, whatever, we can just do Vase 1. And this one here we'll call Vase 2. And this one here, let's create a new geometry node setup, Vase 3. Vase 1 is going to get Vase Material 1. And not sure why that didn't work. There we go. This one's going to get vase material 2, and that worked fine that time. So then vase material 3 is on vase 3 there. Then let's set up different settings here. For this one here, I'm going to turn the noise scale down to something like 1.8. And if we cycle through some iterations, maybe we can find something that looks good. If we want to, we can adjust this add and multiply as well. Make it more drastic and shrink this down maybe. Something that looks pretty good. And then this last one, same kind of thing. You know, we'll just kind of switch around this here. I don't know why I did that. Okay, what's going on? Okay, there we go. It's all better now. Let's go to 2 for this one here. And I'm going to cycle through some different options until I find something I like. That looks pretty good. By the way, with this wave texture, we can also do a couple different options. Let's make this a little bigger and just zoom in on this one here. If we wanted, we could also do diagonal. Just kind of a different look there. Looks pretty cool. Or maybe do something, I'll go back to Z. We could do something like saw, which is a little tricky to see, but if you zoom in, you can see now it's, sharp at the top and then angular on the bottom there. And if we wanted to switch that around too, we could bring in a color ramp or an invert node and just flip this around. And now it's the opposite way. So just some different options there. I'm just going to bring this off and turn it back to sine for now, but something to play around with anyways. I'm also going to make a quick base for these to sit on just by hitting Shift A and bringing in a plane. I'm going to scale this up, go into edit mode, hit 2 to go into edge select, grab that back edge and hit E and Z just to extrude it straight up. Then grab that edge there one more time and hit Control B and use this mouse wheel to control how many separations we have and just move the mouse back and forth. Let's do like this many, I guess, and just tap back into object mode, hit W or right click to bring up this context menu and go shade smooth. Now we've got a nice background here. If we grab this here, we can hit 1 and center in on it by hitting the period/delete key, then hitting Control Alt 0 on the number pad to get the camera to the view there. And then I'm going to hit GZZ to zoom out a little bit, maybe RX to rotate it on that axis, and hit G and Z to bring it up a little bit to frame it nicely. Let's also set up some parameters here. I'm going to go ahead and plug some stuff into this group input here. I'll start with the W value on the noise there. And then I'll do this add from this math node and the multiply right here. Then let's hit N, bring up this shelf, and we can go ahead and go to group. We can rename these. I'm going to remove this geometry because we don't really need that. Let's go to W. This is going to be noise iteration, I'll call it. You can call it whatever you want, as long as you understand what it's doing. So for some reason that didn't work. I'm going to type it down here. Here we go. And this one is going to be radius. And this is going to be, I don't know why that's not working. I'll just type it down here. And this is going to be radius range. Let's also feed the noise scale into there. And we can call that noise size. And let's feed this value right here. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Go ahead and feed it in there. Maybe I just had to go like this. Yeah, there we go. And we'll do the same thing with this one here. I'm going to name this one horizontal resolution, and this one I'll call vertical resolution or just vert res. It doesn't really matter what you name it, just make sure that you understand what it does. And then if we go ahead and go to our modifiers panel, we have all these settings right here. You can change them right here, and they'll change on our object. So we don't have to go into the modifier, or pardon me, the geometry node setup and search for the right setting. We can just come here and type it in. I'm going to go ahead and set these both to 16, just so it's reset there. If you want, you can also move one of these up or down by clicking on it and clicking these arrows. I might move the noise size up a little bit there. And let's say you wanted some kind of tooltip here as well. If you want, you can add that in for the horizontal resolution. Why don't we just do that, just for an example. So I'll just go horizontal resolution. And then if you hover over it right here, it should say horizontal resolution, just to give you a bit more information about what that parameter does. Okay, that's all for today. I hope that was helpful for you. If you do have any questions, let me know in the comments. And if you have any suggestions on how I can make my workflow better, please let me know, because like I said, I'm still pretty new to geometry nodes, still figuring them out. So thanks a lot for watching.